Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at the life of King Solomon.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically 1 Kings chapters 10 and 11. And we're going to be looking at how his wisdom, he was known for his wisdom.
Right.
But how that wisdom brought him riches.
Yeah.
But how it ultimately couldn't save him from, making some seriously bad choices.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how these chapters resonate, even today. Yeah. We're talking about the relationship between wisdom, wealth, and staying true to your values.
Right.
It's really like a blueprint for success, but also a cautionary tale all rolled into one.
Yeah, so let's jump into it. So we start with the Queen of Sheba.
Mm-hmm.
And she's basically heard all this hype about Solomon's wisdom and decides to check it out for herself. But she's not easily convinced.
Right.
She comes in with a skeptical mind and a whole bunch of riddles to test Solomon.
Oh, yeah, to put him to the test. And Solomon, with all that divine wisdom, flowing through him, answers every single one of her questions.
Like it was
With ease, it was nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But here's what's really striking.
Yeah.
It wasn't just his brain power that impressed her. The queen was blown away by the magnificence and the order of his entire kingdom. She saw how Solomon's wisdom was translated into tangible success.
Wait, hold on. Are you telling me she was impressed by his organizational skills? That's not really what you'd think of when you think of like a legendary wise king.
It might seem surprising, but think about it. A well-organized kingdom thriving under wise leadership. That's a testament to Solomon's ability to apply his wisdom practically. And it definitely made an impact on the queen. We're talking lavish gifts, mountains of gold spices, precious stones.
Whoa.
Yeah, the works, basically. And on top of that, Solomon was also getting a steady stream of resources from his ally, King Hiram of Tyre. And Tyre was like a major trading power back then.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this alliance was a real strategic win for Solomon.
So Solomon's story just reminds us that, like, being a problem solver is a timeless path to success. But it makes you wonder, where does all this wealth come from? Is it just about being smart, or is there something more to it?
That's a good question. Solomon's wealth wasn't just a product of his IQ. People from all over the world flocked to him, seeking advice, offering gifts in exchange for his insights. He was like a global consultant, using his God-given wisdom to help others navigate challenges.
That's a pretty sweet gig. What's the lesson here for us? Is it just about charging top dollar for our expertise?
It's deeper than that. The source material really emphasizes that Solomon's wealth came from his willingness to use his wisdom to serve others. It's about sharing knowledge to empower those around you, not hoarding it for your own personal gain.
Okay, so we've got wise king, unimaginable wealth. A kingdom that's basically the envy of the ancient world. Sounds like a fairy tale ending, right?
Not so fast. As we move into chapter 11, things take a turn for the worse.
Oh.
And this is where we see the danger of wisdom without integrity. Despite his extraordinary intellect, Solomon allows his heart to drift away from God, prioritizing his own desires over his faith.
So trouble's brewing.
Yeah.
What happens?
Well, he starts forming relationships with a lot of foreign women.
Okay.
Not just any women. We're talking women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, the Hittites. These were groups that God specifically warned him against.
So he's ignoring a giant red flag. What's the big deal with these relationships anyway?
Well, these relationships fueled by passion and maybe a sense of invincibility led him down a dangerous path. Solomon, the wise king, starts participating in idol worship.
Oh, no.
This is a direct violation of God's commandments. It's a classic tale of how even the wisest among us can be tempted and stray from what we know is right.
So Solomon's basically trading, divine wisdom for forbidden romance. Not exactly a wise move.
Right.
But how does this actually play out? Does he get like a slap on the wrist, or are we talking serious consequences here?
Oh, it gets serious. God is not pleased. And Solomon's actions have consequences. And those consequences come in the form of some pretty formidable adversaries.
Okay, so enemies are starting to circle. Who are we talking about here?
Well, first up, we've got Hadad the Edomite. He had been nursing a grudge against Israel ever since David's conquest of Edom, which, by the way, was generations ago.
Oh, wow.
But with Solomon showing some weakness, Hadad sees an opportunity to take back what he believes is rightfully his.
So old wounds reopening at the worst possible time for Solomon.
Exactly.
Who else is gunning for him?
Well, next we have Rezon, who emerges as a threat from Damascus. This guy seizes control of Damascus and establishes a rival kingdom, constantly challenging Solomon's authority. These external threats start draining Solomon's resources and creating instability within his kingdom.
So enemies at the gates. literally and figuratively. But Solomon's problems weren't just external.
Right.
A storm was brewing within his kingdom too, right?
Exactly. Remember Jeroboam, the ambitious servant that Solomon had promoted? Well, God has other plans for him. Plans that will change the course of history.
Wait, Jeroboam, the guy who seemed destined for greatness? What happens with him?
One day, Jeroboam has this crazy encounter with the prophet Ahijah, and this is not your average meet and greet. Ahijah takes his brand new cloak and rips it into 12 pieces.
Okay.
Then he hands 10 of those pieces to Jeroboam.
Whoa, I'm picturing Jeroboam just staring at these pieces of cloak like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah.
That's got to be some kind of prophecy, right?
It was a powerful visual for sure. Ahijah explains that God is about to divide the kingdom. 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel will go to Jeroboam, leaving only a fraction of the kingdom for Solomon's descendants.
This cloak thing, it was a visual gut punch. Imagine Jeroboam standing there, holding those pieces, knowing his destiny was to split the kingdom. It's a sobering thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
The consequences of our actions can echo for generations.
It's a powerful illustration of how interconnected our choices are and how they can have a ripple effect that extends far beyond our own lives.
So Solomon brought this on himself, but it's his son who's going to inherit a broken kingdom.
Yeah.
That's rough.
And this division wasn't just about land or power. It was a spiritual fracturing as well. The 10 tribes that followed Jeroboam ended up establishing their own places of worship, straying even further from the covenant God made with David.
It's like a chain reaction of disobedience, all stemming from Solomon's initial choices. But hold on, what happens to Solomon himself in all of this? Does he ever realize the magnitude of his mistakes?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at Solomon's ultimate fate and see if there's any indication that he came to terms with the consequences of his actions.
Okay, so we're back for the final chapter in this story of King Solomon. We've seen how his wisdom brought him all this incredible wealth and influence. But we've also seen how his choices fractured his kingdom. It really set off this chain reaction of consequences. So what becomes of Solomon himself? Does he have this grand epiphany or just spend his last days wallowing in regret?
That's the question that lingers, isn't it? Does he find his way back to, some place of reconciliation with God? Well, the text doesn't explicitly lay out a dramatic repentance scene or anything like that, but there are some hints.
Okay, I like hints.
That suggest a possible shift in perspective.
I'm all about those subtle hints. What are we talking about here?
Well, for one, we know that Solomon continues to rule until his death. He doesn't completely lose his grip on power, despite all the challenges he faces. This suggests that he might have retained some level of wisdom, even as he was, wrestling with these struggles.
Yeah, so maybe he learned some lessons along the way, even if it wasn't like a sudden, flash of insight.
Right.
Sometimes experience is the toughest teacher, but it also leaves the most lasting lessons.
Exactly. And there's another detail that's fascinating.
Okay.
Remember those writings attributed to Solomon?
Yeah.
Well, some scholars believe that Ecclesiastes, a book known for its reflections on the meaning of life and the nature of worldly success, might have been written during Solomon's later years.
That is fascinating. If Ecclesiastes is coming from a more mature, reflective Solomon, it could suggest a change in his understanding of what truly matters. It's like he's looking back on his life with all of its highs and lows and coming to this new realization about wisdom and happiness.
Precisely. Ecclesiastes is full of verses that seem to echo the lessons that Solomon might have learned. Like there's that famous line, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." It's like he's saying that chasing after wealth and power can leave you feeling empty.
That's a really powerful message, and it still resonates today. It's like Solomon speaking through the ages, urging us to find a deeper purpose, a connection with something bigger than ourselves. But what does all of this mean for us? Trying to navigate our own lives. How can we learn from Solomon's journey? And maybe avoid making some similar mistakes?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Wisdom and success are valuable, but they're not the ultimate measures of a life well lived. They can easily become idols, leading us down paths that end up feeling empty.
Yeah, it's kind of a paradox. The things that we strive for, like wealth and power and recognition, can also be the things that trip us up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Solomon's story teaches us to be wary of those traps, to check our motivations, and make sure what we're chasing is actually aligned with our values and principles. It's about finding that balance between ambition and, spiritual grounding.
And maybe the most challenging lesson is realizing that even the wisest among us can make foolish choices.
Yeah, we all have blind spots. We have moments of weakness and times where we're just plain vulnerable. That's why it's important to cultivate humility, acknowledge our limitations, and seek guidance from sources beyond ourselves, whether it's through faith or mentors, or just the wisdom of those who have been there before.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life of King Solomon, it's clear he teaches us that even brilliance can be fragile. He had it all: wisdom, wealth, and power. But ultimately, it was his choices that defined his legacy. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.